People say, did you ever play a criminal in a movie? Did you ever? And I did, and I just wasn't very good at it.
Hello, I'm Marilyn MacKay in the back lot of Universal Studios in the heart of Hollywood, California. Tonight's guest is one of film's all-time greats. As a matter of fact, Jimmy Stewart may be the most loved and respected actor of our time. And tonight, you'll find out why. A true legend in his own time, Stewart's magnificent career has spanned more than 50 years of motion picture history. The legend of Jimmy Stewart began when he and his close friend, actor Henry Fonda, began auditioning together for the theater. Well, much to Fonda's surprise, Stewart, this Princeton graduate, seemed to find roles very easily. Perhaps it was Stewart's natural charm and charisma that allowed him to play himself in each starring role. Characters that sometimes made us feel just a little wild. Or sometimes a little dizzy. But most of the time, he made us feel just wonderful.
That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
Or made us proud to fly just a little bit higher. But Jimmy Stewart was not only a celluloid hero. During World War II, he proved that he had the right stuff, just like his father had proven in World War I. The tragedy of war is brutal, and of the Stewarts' 4 beautiful children, Ronald, Michael, and the twins, Kelly and Judy, only Jimmy and Gloria's eldest son, Ronald, would make the ultimate sacrifice in yet another war, Vietnam. Jimmy Stewart's love of God and country is demonstrated by his love for children and his favorite charity, the St. John's Hospital Children's Study Center, which he supports by sponsoring the Jimmy Stewart Relay Marathon in Santa Monica every April. A man who has always given his best, he remembers his very first film role.
He took me up to the producer, and he said, I think there was a new actor who just got in from New York, and looked at his first movie. I thought there was a picture called Murder Man with Spencer Tracy, and I think he would be able to do a very good job in one of the parts. And the producer said, "What part do you want him for?" He said the part of Shorty. The producer said, "No, wait a minute. You bring this long string bean into me, and you say that you want him to play the part of Shorty." And Bill said, "Oh, I thought maybe you could change the name." He says, "Now you want to work on changing the script." No. Well, at the end, I played the part, but my name was Shorty. Yeah.
How did they work that out? That's so funny.
No, but this is the way it was. This was my first part. I'll never forget, and I'll always be grateful to Spence Tracy. He was so great to me in that picture without being so-and-so giving me advice like this or calling me over and talking. Nothing. It just little, every once in a while, he'd say something. And every once in a while he'd say, that was right. I'll never forget it.
Did that help you to have confidence and keep going along in the business? I mean, to have people like Spencer Tracy and that sort of cheering for you or rooting for you or being on your side?
Oh, boy. It means an awful lot. It means an awful lot just to have of the director.
Well, what is the relationship between the actor and the director?
The directors, number one, were interested in what they get up there on the screen visually. As far as the lines were concerned, that this was a part of whoever wrote them. Or if the director wrote the picture himself, he would forget. If it doesn't sound right, I'll change it. And this idea of him absolutely wanting to get up on the screen and having the idea of what he wants up there, this made it good for everybody. Hitchcock was a good example of that. Hitchcock, for instance, I never saw Hitchcock look through a camera. He would, Bob Burks, a wonderful man, wonderful cameraman, worked with him for years. And Hitchcock said, when we'd finish one scene, Hitch would do this, and Bob would get back there and look. Then Hitch would go over and sit in a chair, and Bob would start lighting the scene and everything. And then he'd come over and said, we're all set, we're lit. And Hitch said, all right, now the actors, let's all get in there and move around and see, sort of work it so you don't run into each other. And don't knock the chairs down. Now, just do it easy, and we'll see how the scene works. And that's sort of the type direction. And he'd finally get up, and he said, "Well, let's try. Let's try a take." And then we'd do it, and we'd do it 2 or 3 times. And he'd say, "Finished." He said, "That's it. That's it." And the script girl, he was a terrible thing, the script girl. The script girl would come up to him and say, "Mr. Hitchcock, Stewart, in the middle of the scene, in the scene, Stewart said his line completely backwards." And it said, "Oh, it looked fine to me."
Do you remember when you wanted to meet Greta Garbo? You were a young actor,
yeah.
And she always kept the aura of secrecy. Do you remember your first meeting with Greta Garbo?
Yeah, I was working on a stage right next to her, and I knew the sound operator, the operator of the sound boom, and I said, "Would you call me as soon as I knew a limousine came to her and picked her up, although it was about 20, 30 yards to her dressing room. She had a limousine that picked her up and put her. And would you call me so I can just get out and get a look at her?" And he said, and a couple of days went by, and a couple of days, and then when about 5 o'clock, I said, she just finished, and she's in her stage dressing room, and I think she's on her way out. So I stopped. I wasn't working. I stopped. I went around the corner, and the door was right there. Somebody came out the door, and I knocked to get into the door. I knocked and stopped. And I looked around, and there was Greta Garbo. I knocked her down. And I went down to pick up. She said, "I can get up myself," as though to say, "Leave me." About 20 years later, I met her at a party, and I said, the first time I met you, she said, "I know very well." I remember it very well. So.
You know, one has to wonder, Jimmy Stewart, probably one of the greatest actors of our time, and you have allowed yourself to be totally vulnerable, to be yourself on screen. As a matter of fact, some of the best directors have commented that you are one of the few people that has allowed himself to be himself when you've taken on a part. How can you do that?
I've never quite understood the idea of to be natural. This is a sort of an opinion, but to be yourself, I don't see anything. I put my answer to the question. I stole it from Lord Laurence Olivier, because when somebody asked him that, he said, "Sure, I play Olivier with deference to the character," which I think this answers the question.
But what is the magic about being so believable on the screen?
Well,
that you become that character.
Well, I think believability is something that is almost hard to define, because I just think if you can get your audience to believe what they're seeing up there on the screen, then you're in fine shape.
Well, how have you and Gloria been able to maintain such a strong family in this business, which, you know, even a lot of your very good friends, for example, Henry Fonda had a tragic with his wife. And I mean, there are things that do happen because of the pressures of this business. How did you avoid it? How did you and Gloria avoid that and keep such a normal, healthy family life?
Well, I think Gloria is responsible for that more than anything. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. She's made my life. I think Gloria's responsible for all that.
And it's been a wonderful how many years?
40.
Right. Michael and Ronald were her children for her first marriage, right? Mm-hmm. How old were they at the time?
12 and 14, I think.
Was it difficult for you fitting in as their father?
No, it didn't seem. No, it was a little surprising. But I hadn't been married. I didn't get married until I was 41 years old, and I hadn't been married, and I'd been married 2.5 years, and I ended up with 4 children.
The twins came along?
Twins came along.
How wonderful.
It was great. I'm all for it. I think they medically they ought to do. It doesn't seem any reason to me if you can take something so you can keep from having anything at all. Why can't they make something so you can have 2 at a time? It's 2 at a time. It's wonderful for these 2 girls. They're friends. They grow up together. They're friends. They're married and have kids and everything. And we took them both to Africa last year. Didn't ask the husbands. They stayed home and worked. We took the twin. They never had such a wonderful time in their life. It's a great thing, this twin thing.
But it must have been very, very difficult for you and Gloria when you lost Ron in the Vietnam War. How did you deal with that? Because to me, the most tragic thing is to lose a child. Mm-hmm. Did you talk to God then, or how did you come to terms with it?
Pretty much so. Pretty much. This is a tragedy, a tremendous loss. But and Gloria sort of feels the same way. Yeah. It was not exactly a tragedy, because we lost our boy who was doing this work in the service of his country. And that, I don't think, is a tragedy.
And how did Gloria handle everything all right? And how did you
together, how did you comfort each other? I mean, how did you do that?
I think that was the main thing, comfort each other. And that was the main thing. And we had the funeral down at our church. We had the Marines bringing in and taken to the cemetery and had taps at the end of the service. This all meant a great deal to us.
You a very spiritual man?
Yeah.
Religion has been an important part of your life?
Yeah, tremendously important.
Well, you really believe in family. You came from a very, very strong family. Being the eldest boy, the eldest child in the family, the only boy, was there a lot of pressure on you to succeed, do you think, to be a success in your family?
No, but I early in my life, I got sort of the feeling that it wasn't pounded into me by my father or anything, but hard work got to mean a great deal to me. My father had a hardware store in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and I learned it. He didn't sit me down and say, "Now, son, you have to remember that hard work." He didn't have to do that. I learned by just seeing the activity and by just seeing the work that he did, that hard work was a very important thing in life. And I'm very grateful, among a great many things, for getting to know about that at a very early age.
Well, how did he show you that? Because he worked so hard himself?
Yeah.
Do you still have the penny that you and your father, when you went to see the body of Harding coming through town, do you still have that penny?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about what happened?
My dad found out that President Harding was going back to his hometown for burial, and that the train was coming through Torrance. And I asked if we could go down and see the train. And the train was going to due in about 3:30 the next morning. And my mother said, "No, you have to get there. You're right in the middle of the school week. You can't do that." And my dad said, "I think maybe Mom's right. You know, it's a little late." And I said, "All right." I went to bed. Well, in a couple of hours, I felt somebody tapping me. And it was my dad, and he said, "Come on, we're going to Torrance." And it was fine. We were there. There were quite a few people there. And somebody said, "Well, 3 minutes." And my dad gave me a penny. And he said, "Put this on the top of the track." And he put his right beside it. And the train went away, and the last car was the casket, and it was lit, and Marines standing at attention. And after it left, my dad said, "Get the pennies up." And the pennies were about that big now. They'd been flattened out, could hardly see any of the things that are on the pennies. But it got to be quite a thing. And I shaved up because it was very sharp around there. So I shaved this off so it didn't go through my pants when I was carrying it in my pocket. And he kept it, and I kept mine for years and years. And I remember after my father's death, after the funeral, I went back to the store and sort of was looking around and looking around. I went into the office he had, and I was just looking in, and I opened the door, sort of the main drawer, and looked down, and there was his penny. So he'd had it all his life.
You were one of the best actors in Hollywood, one of the most bankable actors in Hollywood, and the war came along.
Most actors try to get out of going to the war. You didn't. Why?
No, I just, the war itself, I think this was just something that I was determined to get into. The fact that I had this tremendous interest in aviation and had since I was a kid, and it was sort of, I was being able to put this to use. The whole thing was a tremendous experience for me. And when at the end of the war, when I got back, my contract at MGM had expired during the war, and they offered me another one, but my agent advised me not to go independent. So I didn't know exactly what. I didn't know whether you forget how to act, or whether in the 4 years I've been away, whether the whole system had changed. I didn't know. But of course, one of the good fortunes, of the great good fortune I've had all my life, was that Frank Capra gave me the first chance at a job. And this got me going, although the picture didn't do well at that time.
What a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
What is it that gives you the most pleasure in acting? Is it the impact that you have on people?
No, I think it's the actual working and trying to make a story work.
And which picture has been your greatest challenge in that, do you think?
I think probably It's a Wonderful Life, because I had been away for 4 years. I didn't know. I give most of the credit for that to Frank Capra. Everything that happened, it was because of his way of doing things. And as far as, being the first one I'd done in 4 years, and whether I'd forgotten or not, he was able to dismiss all this. And Frank got me started there.
Did you have doubts? Here you are, the superstar. You finished one film, another one is coming up. Did you ever doubt yourself or question, will I be up to the next one, or never? Was that never, you were always so confident, never went through your mind?
Well, I suppose after It's a Wonderful Life and the fact that it didn't do very well, I was a little like this. But in the old days, when I came out there and when I was under contract to MGM, you were always so busy you didn't have time to think about things like that. You worked, people don't realize that they don't, actors don't sit around at home and wait for somebody to send them a script that they like, and they wait and wait. We went to work every day at 8 o'clock and came home at 6, and we worked 6 days a week, and we worked all day. And whether had big parts in little pictures and little parts in big pictures, and we worked. If we weren't working in a picture, we were doing tests for people that were trying out for another picture. We were on the road plugging a picture we weren't even in. We were in the gym trying to keep in shape. We would people don't realize that the big studio system had this thing. You weren't sort of an individual, and everything sort of depended on you. You were working in this enormous. I kept calling it a family, because everything sort of worked. You had a big commissary, and everybody went to the commissary for lunch, and you knew everybody, and you knew, except Garbo, and you knew.
But you knew her. Yeah. You've always related so well to your audience, always. Now, what has been your greatest satisfaction, do you think, sort of reflecting over the last 82 years?
I've always thought, and this would, I've always thought of the audience, and I learned this early in my career from a fellow by the name of Ted Healy. And I was in a picture with him, and we were out on the way to the desert trying to get to some kind of a, I forgot, a racing car picture. And he was funny all the time. He was just, that's funny. But then suddenly he said, well, who can tell? You might get along all right out here. You know, this thing like this. But there's one thing to remember. Never treat your audience as customers. Always treat them as partners. I've never forgotten that. I think that's absolutely true. Absolutely dead. If you don't have your audience as partners, you don't have an audience. You don't. You need them. You are grateful to them. Not customers. This is a different thing. But as partners, you're grateful to them. And this has been a great thing for me in my life.
Jimmy Stewart has certainly shown us that in order to find our own unique talents, we must each follow our own destiny and our own beliefs. Thanks to Jimmy Stewart for sharing his wonderful talents with us all these years, and thanks to you for watching. I'm Marilyn MacKay in Los Angeles, California, wishing you a good night and a great week.
It's amazing the number of people, and important people, during the history of the picture, motion picture, felt this way. It felt very strongly that it was a visual medium. John Ford, he said it, and I remember every word he said because he said it more than once. He said, if you can't tell your story visually, without relying on the spoken word, then you're not using the motion picture medium correctly.
This award-winning series is a discovery of personal excellence and is made possible, in part, by the Ricoh Corporation, the leading edge of office equipment and camera technology. Ricoh, where imagination becomes reality. Marilyn MacKay's Autograph is an MJM production.